Ash. I am Ash, and I'm here today with my mom, Sandy. Today's topic is going to be a death of a parent. The last year I've seen my mom and my father go through serving my grandma before she died. And so I thought that quite a few of you might be able to relate to this, or you might be able to relate to it in the future, and maybe it'd be helpful. I think they went through it as gracefully as they could, even though it was very difficult. So yeah, she agreed to help me out and hopefully help you guys out. But yeah, I think maybe to start, I thought of a lot of questions just because of like what I've seen you guys go through. But I guess in my viewpoint, Grandma was on the decline pretty quickly, but I was far away. So maybe to you it was quick, or I don't know, a slow progression to her. Yeah.
It was hard to tell because she was blind.
Yeah.
She had very little sight, and it's a family disease that I didn't get, but that my sisters did, and my mom, and all down her line.
Mm-hmm.
So with blindness, it's hard to tell because there's already a lot of discrepancies, not being able to find things and not being able to use her phone correctly. And the things that you would normally notice with somebody who's declining with dementia was hidden in her blindness.
Yeah. I think like none of us want to go through our parents dying.
Yeah.
Like, dude, it's a super difficult thing. Like, I didn't even want to imagine it. I can't imagine. But literally every person on the planet goes through it somehow. I guess from there, like, I know that Grandma's blind. You served her for a long time, even through her blindness, like going grocery shopping for her and getting things. Yeah. But she was pretty independent. Like, Grandma was
she
super
was a very independent, stubborn person. Like, she had a mind of her own, and I knew that she had this disease from early on. She had a detached retina at 16 years old. So she has lived with a certain amount of blindness all her life, and knowing that she would be blind before she passes, just like her mom was. So she prepared herself, and she was very self-sufficient.
But she still walked 5 miles.
She would still walk 5 miles with her seeing eye dog.
Yeah.
Up and down the highway.
Yeah.
And sometimes not pushing the button before crossing the road and just crossing with her dog, not knowing that there was a sign that was flashing, don't cross.
Yeah.
And having everybody honk their horns at her. So,
and despite being blind, she went through school to be a massage therapist.
Yeah.
And
so she
massaged people for a really long time, helping others.
She was a massage therapist. She actually took care of her own mom, who was blind and had a form of dementia as well.
Yeah.
But she was at 50 something years old. She went to school to become a massage therapist and worked in her own home for years, and she was really good. She did not need more clients. She had to turn people away. So
we loved it as kids that she gave us massages.
Yeah.
When we were little. But so then the decline, I guess dementia is also part of this because of how she died.
Right.
But the decline of dementia and maybe even the particular things that had happened, that kind of gave you guys the idea that she was,
there was
losing
something wrong.
It kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that, first what I want to say is that, my experience may not be someone else's experience,
100%.
But there was a lot to learn in all of this. And so when we lose a parent, there is the option of going through it very traumatically or trying to choose to pull the good out as you're going through it. And sometimes that's really hard to do, especially in the midst of it all. But in the end, I feel like there was a huge blessing in the end for me in a couple different ways. But what I also want to say is that, I unapologetically tell my story because it's my story and my testimony of what happened in my life. And so,
and your perspective of what it is.
So I'm just going to tell the truth of my story and my emotions and how I walked through that. And because I'm a Christian, it's going to have that. I'm going to lean more in that direction. And that's just who I am and what I believe. So it really wraps up in that, the process. So, I would say So when my mom raised four of us, my sisters and I, so there were 5 girls.
Mm.
She raised us all with my dad, but she was like the kind of the strong person in our family. And so as we were growing up, a lot of my sisters, including me, had some difficulties with my mom. So the relationship was rough. As we all got older, there were times when my sisters would stop talking to my mom, or I stopped talking and had to lay down some boundaries. So when it came to my mom's older years and her process of leaving this earth, the relationships were not good between my mom and my sisters. And I was the one left in town. My sisters, most of them lived out of town. And
I definitely wanted to touch on that because I think a lot of people, that's like one of the hardest things is you have siblings, but none of them are taking care of your parent when they're on the decline. And then a lot of them end up being the only one.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
It is hard. It can cause resentment. And I think I was a little bit resentful for a while. But I also came to understand that it was kind of my call in life to take care of my mom. My mom trusted me and she trusted me to take care of her. And she knew that I would do what she requested over doing what I wanted to do with her. Yeah. And that I had told her I would keep her at home as long as possible, and that would be something that she could trust and value. And
despite not giving appreciation for that. So you had to work through, like I saw you working through that of not getting the appreciation for what you were trying to do the best that you could for this person.
Yeah. And that was her personality even growing up, it was never enough. I think that inside of her on occasions, she felt like that, but, because I felt some healing when she passed, and the relationship and what we'll talk about is in that change, the change as her illness progressed, something changed in me about my view of her. But I can tell you that there were times where I just wanted to strangle her. I mean, I'd literally leave her house and, and times when I would go home and just pray, Lord, do I have to keep doing this? Like, do I have to keep taking some of the abuses that she was pouring out? Yeah. Little did I know that some of that was who she was, and some of it was the dementia that we didn't know was there at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't easy. None of it was easy. None of it came easy to you. Like, even though you are a service person, even though helping comes easy to you, like naturally it does.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to family members, like, that you can't have too many people pouring in. There has to be somebody who's kind of in charge of her care. And that became me. Yeah. And I was very surprised that she wanted me to do that, because she really, in the beginning, said, I'll just let social services take care of me instead of any of my children, which was like a dangerous thing really for her to do, because they're not going to do what she's asking either.
So like with that, I did want to ask, like, what kind of support were you getting from other outside sources? Like, how did you move into that direction? Like, if she was to say them take care of her and not one of her children, what would that look like? And is it better to just step in and help your parents? And how do you find like help in doing that?
Yeah. So,
because from my perspective, I didn't see you guys getting much help. I saw you guys asking for help and trying like to get help. But through that experience, maybe you did find something that would help someone else.
Yeah. So in the beginning, just getting her set up on, she was low income, so she was able to get Medicaid, and Medicaid, is usually for people who, I mean, I might not say all these things exactly correctly because I don't know all the parameters of what they say yes to and what they don't, but I had to apply for Medicaid for her. And because she was blind, she had a disability. So because you have a disability and you're low income, you can get on that. So that made a tremendous difference in itself, because they could bring more help in for less money than if my mom had a huge income, all of that. My mom also did not fully own her home. So when you sign up for Medicaid, my mom had a reverse mortgage. So she was living off of that reverse mortgage. And So Medicaid, when you sign that contract with them for them to help, then you're also signing away whatever she has when she passes. Medicaid can claim every penny that they spent on her and get that back after she passes from the sale of her home or whatever she owns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was something I learned in the process that was important for us to know because my mom didn't have much. So the only thing they could take was a percentage of her home.
Yeah. Well, and I think like through the process, what I learned was to like make sure your parents or those that are around you have like wills or have done something. I don't know what, like everything that you should have done for this kind of situation, but like, but grandma's will was old.
Right.
Like,
oh, yes. It was from when I was 17 years old, 18 years old, 1983.
Yeah.
When she willed me over her dog, what was it? Lady. Yeah. Lady. So I get Lady when my mom passes away.
Which Lady's been gone for years.
Yeah, since probably a couple years after that. And my sisters and she probably would have done things differently had she over time done her will years later.
Your priority of like where things go and what things would look like if you were gone change.
Yeah.
And so you have to update it.
Right. You have to update it. Because I know that in the end, probably my mom wouldn't have chosen to do those things that she had chosen in 1983.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So your will better be updated.
Well, keep your will updated.
No, you.
Oh, mine. Yeah. Well, we are doing that for sure. I've learned my lesson.
Yeah. I think that was one of the craziest things I learned through that. But
making sure they have a will early on, making sure they have a DNR if they want a DNR. So do not resuscitate. And that's usually for people who have cancer or some terminal disease where they know they're going to probably die from that disease. And do they want life support? Do they want to be fed? Do they want water? What life-saving preventatives do they want or not want?
Yeah.
And that's important.
And it's better to make those decisions while they're lucid. Like when they can make those decisions themselves, because it's hard because you were the guarantor.
Yeah.
You were the person that made those decisions when she wasn't able to.
Yeah. So I was the power of attorney.
Yeah, exactly.
And the medical power of attorney. So
and those are all harder decisions to make.
Yeah.
For a person versus that person setting the boundaries.
Exactly.
And they're able to.
And when you go in to do that, you have to have someone there to witness. And then it has to be, when you do a home durable attorney or power of attorney, you have to have it notarized. And so when you do that, you have to bring someone in with you that is not a family member. So when people do that, they need to make sure they do that thoroughly. And then you can file it at the courthouse so that there is a copy of that. And it just costs you per page to do that. So it's not hugely expensive. So
how do you find out all these things that you need to do?
I just found out as I went through the journey. I didn't really have a lot of people and friends that had happened to, that had already gone through it. It was a lesson learned for sure.
Yeah.
It'd be easier to have a whole list, and you can go online and say, what do I need to do if my parent is ill? And it will provide you some of those steps.
Yeah. I do think that either way, it's really hard, but like if it's an unexpected thing, then you don't have any of these things in order, then it is more difficult when you're also grieving at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
You're also going through a lot of things.
There's a lot there. And then they also do need to make sure that their parents have a living will. So a living will also, it helps you to write down all of the instructions you want in the case of your death, or, what your wishes are for your belongings and all of that. So that's important for them to have so that you're not scrambling at the end saying, oh, I don't know what my mom would have wanted for this or that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like for grandma, she couldn't make those decisions by herself when it came to the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then where was your support coming from?
So support wise,
like personal support too, like your mental health.
Oh yeah. So, and at the time I was working at a counseling office and I was the care coordinator. So I did have some access to some people to talk to there as I was going through it and just, being able to vent through that. But, my husband was, your dad was one of the best listeners, because he saw
Yeah.
it all happening and he
Yeah.
watched it all happen, and he would be there when she would have those moments where I had to just walk out of the house and say, Mom, if you don't stop doing what you're doing right now, like talking to me like that, I'm going to have to leave. So one of the things I learned in this was huge for me, which was boundaries.
Yeah.
We all have to have boundaries around people that are difficult. And my mom was, I love her, and I don't mean to talk, I'm not talking bad about her. She had a different personality and she had a strong will. And so when nobody wants to give up their rights. Nobody. And so it's so hard when they have to give up driving, which my mom gave up a long, long time ago, when they have to give up their own house and their own privacy and have someone else come in and help. Every amount of independence slowly whittles down, and you're the one, they look at you as possibly the one that's taking that away from them.
Yeah.
And honestly, we have to put that person first and say, this is the last of their life. What do we have to do to keep them safe? And what do we have to do to keep them with as much independence as they can have before they pass? And
like putting ourselves in their shoes, because like I know
I'd
feel the same way.
Right. And nobody wants to be treated like a child when they're a grown adult. Having your children treat you like you're the child, it's so damaging and really heartbreaking for them. And it's hard. I saw her go through some of that, but I tried really hard to honor her as an adult and still as my mom, but still have the boundaries that I needed to have that kept me safe from getting hurt from her. Even though I stay safe, it still happened. Yeah. But there were times when I had to walk away and say, I won't be coming for another week or so because you did this and I can't have you doing that to me or talking to me that way or.
But all that was happening like before she had fully kind of gotten and had dementia. So then from that point, like how did you decide what to do? Like where grandma ended up in a home for people.
She ended up in a nursing home because she was at a point where she could not live at home by herself anymore. And during this time, I kept in contact with my siblings and my sister. I have one sister that would come from out of town and come and visit her. Two of my sisters were not in the picture really at all. And the other one that lives in the same town worked full time. So it was really, really kind of left on my plate to take care of my mom and to figure all this out. And two of them wanted to help, but also my mom made that very difficult. So in that process, trying to figure out what she needed and then her demands, of what she says she wanted, we brought people in to help her. So we brought housekeepers in, we brought, Catholic Services has people that will come in and because she had and then this is just another having what is it called? Let's see, Medicaid. So because she had Medicare and Medicaid would pay for some of those people coming in, and they would pay for a great percentage of it because she was blind. Now, at this point, my mom is still walking around her house. She still wants to go for walks outside, but she's blind, so she can't see the ground and can't tell, where uneven ground is, and it's just too easy for her to fall. So she stopped being able to walk by herself, which she hated giving up and felt like that was me that was doing that. But it really was for her own safety to take someone with her. So bringing those people in that could help her with some of those things and kind of keep her company, and bringing them there to,
she really got to know her lady that came in all the time and really liked each other.
Right. And cooking was a big deal too. Like she stopped being able to see whether meat was all the way done or not. And, all those things, her medications, I had to come in and do her medications because it takes a nurse to come in and do medications. Other people can't do that. And they don't do that for you. So that ends up being on the family. So I ended up doing all her medications for every week and making sure that she was taking all of those. And there's a lot of pressure in that, more than I thought. I didn't like doing it for her or my dad when I cared for my dad because if they take something wrong,
Mhm.
I would feel responsible for
Mhm.
that. If I did something wrong and put something in there that, 2 of one pill and it
Yeah.
harmed them somehow, there's a lot of pressure in that I think people just think it's an easy job, and it's not. So
No,
you
wouldn't
double
think
and
about
triple
that
things.
being pressure. Like,
Yeah. I mean,
think about it.
yeah. And she would often put pills in her hand, but then the pills would fall through the cracks of her fingers and she
Mhm.
wouldn't even know it. So she
Mhm.
wouldn't end up taking those, and we would find pills on the floor all the time.
I remember
Yeah.
cleaning your house. And
Yeah.
finding pills everywhere.
So, and she knew it, but she
Yeah.
couldn't get down on the
No,
floor and
she
find
wouldn't
them.
find it. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that was just part of the blindness. But then
Yeah.
when it got to dementia for her and things started to progress, I think that the first time, and my mom had Lewy body dementia, which is to me the worst dementia that a person can have, at least in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So in my experience with my mom, she began to change, but we didn't see those subtle changes, like I said before, because of her blindness. And she just seemed to be getting more and more stubborn and more aggressive. And to the point of one day I went in and told her, that I should take her to the doctor because she had fallen. And she was yelling at me and telling me to get out. Like, get out of my house. Get out of my house right now. You're not going to force me to go. Like just something that was, that wouldn't be surprising for her to do, but that, was a little beyond what she would normally do. So these subtle changes started happening. And then her forgetting how to use the remote control. She can't see the remote control, but she used to be able to put the TV on and watch a show. But, no, small things had started happening, but to us, it just fell into the blindness category.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, we missed some of those things until, she started having, full on like hallucinations. And that goes with Lewy body dementia. And, I won't go into the whole explanation of what Lewy bodies are, but you can look it up on the internet and it's easy to find and why that happens. But
it's way more terrifying if you're blind.
Yeah. Yeah. And people who lose any of their senses, like blindness, hearing, sight, or not sight. Yeah. Blindness, hearing, sight, and,
blindness, sight.
And sensing, like numbness in fingers and all of that stuff. Those people tend to get dementia as they get older because they've lost one of their senses that keeps them more aware in the world and more, we're built to have those, And so, that unfortunately with her blindness, her mom also had dementia. And, so that can definitely go along with that.
Yeah.
So when we knew something was wrong, like let's go back to, Lewy body dementia. So the only way to get diagnosed for that is to take them to a doctor. The doctor sends them to a specialist, to a neurologist, and then the neurologist is the one that determines what kind of dementia or whether it's Alzheimer's or, they are the ones that do determine that. So for us, my mom never got an appointment to determine exactly what she had because the doctor. So I took her into the doctor. I need to back up maybe a little bit. So
you can start wherever you want.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is one day she called me on the phone. Well, actually, she'd been having a hard time using her phone. And she told me that there were rats in her house and that the rats were attacking her dog at night in his cage. And that didn't make any sense at all. So we went down there, we checked. My sister also went down and we all kind of just checked her house. Like, are there any droppings anywhere? Is there any sign of that? And the one thing that clued me in is that she said she could hear them running on her carpet and then running after the dog.
Yeah.
And then
she was completely convinced.
She was convinced, absolutely convinced.
That something very unrealistic was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we had known she had dementia at that time, I would have responded differently because there is a different way to respond to somebody who has dementia. But we were saying, Mom, there's not any sign of rats anywhere. But she went on for weeks and we ended up having to tape up areas in her house so that there was no access where she thought that there was access. And we went through this cycle of trying to get her comfortable so that she wouldn't think that there were rats in her house and
Yeah.
that they were attacking her dog. And she swore there was a scratch on the dog's face. Well, she's blind. She can't see that, but she was
Yeah.
seeing it.
Yeah.
So here we have this picture of something is wrong here. And so I took her to the doctor and I explained to him what was happening. And I was super frustrated because when we went to this doctor and I sat down and said, she's seeing these things, but she's blind. Here's her explanations. I explained the whole thing to him and he said, well, if I was blind, I might think the same thing. And he was not willing to do anything. Here is a clear view of, some dementia issues. And I explained that she was forgetting how to use things and, that type of thing. And I found him to be very unhelpful. That was her primary care doctor. And so from there, he said, let's take her off some medications. And some of those medications were bladder medications, which older people can have hallucinations while taking bladder medication as they're older, which is
crazy
something they
side
need.
effects.
Right? Yeah.
Things.
And so we tried that. We took her off of it, still
Yeah.
no changes. And so this began progressing pretty quickly to a place where she was having a lot of different hallucinations. I took her to the ocean, and when she woke up in the morning, she said she was looking for me all night upstairs, and we were in like a little A-frame house that had no
Yeah,
upstairs.
yeah.
And that she looked for me all night, and that she saw the dog, somebody let the dog out. She just had this elaborate story that was so real to her, but I knew could not have happened. So I'm still thinking maybe she's just dreaming these things at night. Maybe it's just a dream. And it's just real to her when she wakes up because she's blind. She can't just open her eyes and see, okay, it's daytime.
Right.
I'm in this place, like completely confused, But because they began to progress, and then I started seeing the way she was walking. And being blind, again, it's another thing that kind of hides that.
Right.
That shuffle that people get when they get dementia is it's the what they call a gait. It's the way that they walk, and I started noticing that she had some of that happening. Like she wasn't taking bigger steps, but a blind person doesn't because they're always guarding how they walk. And her balance was a little bit off. Like there were just all these things. In the meantime, because that progressed so fast, at one point I got a call from my mom, and she was calling me saying that somebody had kidnapped her
Yeah.
and taken her somewhere.
Yeah.
And that she was in this she had, again, another very elaborate, very detailed situation.
And then she would be upset with you because she wouldn't feel like she was taken care of in the situation.
Yeah,
when it wasn't real. Like,
Right.
what were you supposed to do in that situation? I know that was really hard for you because you wanted to give her the security
Right.
that she really so desperately wanted, but it wasn't real. So how do you give security to someone when
Right.
what they're seeing, you don't know what they're going to see the next day? It's
Right.
really hard. I know, and I saw that was really hard
Yeah,
on
and
you.
at this point, the diagnosis hadn't been made, so we're still thinking, "What is this?" We weren't familiar with dementia and all the symptoms, and I started looking things up. At first, she would say these things as if she wasn't that scared. Like it was bizarre because she would say somebody had taken her somewhere and they were feeding her, but they weren't talking to her. And again, we were thinking she's having these weird dreams at night because a lot of the times it was nighttime.
Yeah.
And so I actually called the police one night and said, I'm going to my mom's because this will go into the final like push toward the hospital, which was that she called me that night. And so I called the police and I said, hey, I'm going to my mom's. I know she has a gun, but she's not acting right. So I'm thinking I might need some safety here, in case something were to happen, or for you to help me to get into the house without getting shot.
Yeah.
And of course they weren't helpful. They said, these are not the calls we take, and we don't come out to people's houses to do that. So they didn't do anything. So I took the risk and went in and checked on my mom. And when I went inside, it was a different scenario. She said, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just found me. How did you find me? Like, just as if I walked into the building that she was in and she was ready for me to take her home. It was sad, and it really shakes you up because
Yeah.
it's hard to see somebody lose their sense of who they are even in all of this and their own safety. And so in the beginning, I became kind of her safety person, keep rescuing her from these things that are happening to her. But then one night, and it was shortly after that, and my husband, and so your dad and I, we thought we've got to do something about the gun.
Right.
And that had always been her
the
security.
gun, was the security.
Yeah,
Like, but it wasn't a good idea.
No, and she had it her whole married life until she got divorced, and then she
it's not like
lived
she was
alone.
using it.
Yeah, she needed that for her security.
Yeah.
So it was under her pillow, on her bed, a big gun. I don't even know. I don't know about guns very much, but you know how big it was, and it was loaded. And so
Terrifying.
yeah.
But
Yeah, so we went in and we took the gun and brought it home. And then that evening, she called in a panic and said, "My gun's gone. I don't know where it is, and I don't know. I can't sleep without it. I need you to come down and find my gun. It's not under my pillow." So then we thought, well, what are we going to do? Like, she is not going to sleep there without it. She is going to panic all night long.
Yeah.
And so we took the bullets out, and when we got there, we put the gun under the pillow and took all the bullets out of the drawer. So she had no ammo, but she had the security of her gun. So a couple nights later, I get a call from 911, and they say, "We really need you to come down. Your mom's having an incident." So here's the thing. When it's at this point, she's still, according to the doctor, making her own decisions, and she isn't diagnosed with dementia, so I cannot force her to go anywhere. You can't say, "Mom, we're putting you in a home." She could say no, and they won't take her. So you as a family, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place because you have a person who's dangerous to themselves, possibly. Like, she could walk right down her stairs and fall in the cement trying to get out of her own house in fear.
Yeah.
It puts us in a very bad position. But I also understand why, because some people might put their family member somewhere where they, just to make it easier on themselves. But it, for us, made it very difficult because now we're stuck between taking care of my mom and our own lives. Like, how do we keep our own lives going at this point when she is constantly in need and we have
And
no
how
help for
long
her?
was the time period of your life being really taken care of?
I
her?
would say 2 years, and then the last year was getting rougher and rougher. The last 6 months was the roughest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah, it is. And some people have dementia for years and years. And so what ended up happening is I went down, the police were there, she had this hallucination. She was in her bedroom. She said she was taken captive. All of her hallucinations were very scary, very violent, very, and you know, nobody can explain why that is, but it is where the Lewy bodies that land in the brain, where they land, it can do all kinds of things. But that part of her brain obviously was the part of her brain that kind of
Anxiety induced.
anxiety,
Yeah.
and fear and all of that.
Yeah. Terrible.
So she thought she was being taken, and there was a man there, and he was outside her bedroom door, and he was taking his shoelaces off, and she could hear him doing that, and he was going to use those to choke her out. So he was getting ready to kill her. And so she took her gun out, and she shot at her bedroom door. Had there been bullets in it, she would have been shooting her gun at whether it was a policeman outside the door or whoever was outside the door. And so she emptied her gun out, basically shot the 6 bullets out at the door, and then started banging the gun on her window in her bedroom and yelling for help, 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 help. And the neighbor heard it, and this was like 4:00 in the morning. And so, so even at this point, the ambulance said she looks like she's in good health, outside of the dementia or whatever's happening to her.
Sure.
So they weren't going to take her to the hospital.
I know. I think
The police
that's crazy.
didn't do anything because I said, "Isn't she a danger to herself? Is there anything that you can do?" She seems to be, she could harm herself at this point
Yeah.
or someone else. And they said that didn't qualify for being a harm.
But if there
a
were
harm to
bullets in the
others.
gun, it would.
If there had been
have,
bullets in the gun,
which would
they
have
would've-
put anyone
Yes.
in more danger. Like,
Yes.
it's just crazy. I think that that's one of the most standout areas where I didn't see you get support that you needed.
Right. Yeah.
In this situation.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that they would be people who would at least help you into the next step.
Yeah.
Like, here we are, we don't have a diagnosis yet. The doctor didn't help us much, and it's progressing pretty quickly. And we have people coming in and staying with her in the daytime, but at night she's sleeping by herself. We could have brought more people in at night, but we couldn't afford it. Like,
Or the understanding of she's
so
a danger to
expensive.
herself and others.
yeah.
Therefore, we need to put her somewhere where she's not.
Right.
Makes sense, but that's not what happened.
Right, exactly. So
crazy.
we ended up taking her to the hospital that night.
Yeah.
I took her to the hospital, and even then, they did some tests, but they still said, it looks like she has dementia, but we can't keep her overnight for dementia. She seems to be perfectly fine as far as her physical. So they sent her home with us.
Yeah.
So we still have, but we did get an appointment with like a social service person that night, and she talked to us, and she really wanted them to keep her because she could see that she needed help. But the doctor said, the hospital's full, we can't take them. So I bring her home that night, and she ends up in the middle of the night falling out of her bed. And for 3 days, so in the morning she said, I'm stiff. I feel like, and maybe this is just too much information, but she had actually broken her sternum, cracked it open, and put a fracture right through her sternum. And for 3 or 4 days, she was home after she left our house that day. She was home and nobody knew it because even with Lewy body dementia, they stop having pain. It's a bizarre thing. It's so bizarre because it's eating away the brain basically in some ways, and the neurons and the connections, and so she complained when she would get up out of a chair, but we thought maybe it was just her muscles, but she never said she was in enough pain for anybody to even take her to the doctors. We just figured she fell out of bed. So so we did finally take her to the hospital when she's complained again, and one of the caregivers said, she's kind of acting like it hurts her a lot. So we brought her in and found out she had all that. And finally, they kept her at the hospital. And they did a full evaluation and diagnosed her with dementia.
Yeah.
And all of that happened. But it took all of that to get there, which is so hard. I understand that there's just so many people.
Yeah.
And that, you have to have a very clear and distinct. And I had already made an appointment with a neurologist to get a full workup on her, but the appointments were 3 and 4 months out.
So long.
She never made it to that appointment.
No.
With her dementia.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's frustrating.
What advice would you give people that are advocating for their parents in those situations? Like,
Yeah.
you had to fight for even to get to that point, like, is there any advice you can give them? Like, just stick through it, keep fighting, keep
I would
advocating.
say you make all the appointments you can make. Get the doctors to give you the referrals. Even if you're not sure, still make them, because if you wait down the road, things will progress quickly for some
too
people.
fast.
And so, like if that's an issue, get them into the doctor. Keep telling the doctor that you are concerned, because they need to know from your point of view, and they may not look at it clearly the first time or the second time, because doctors don't want to take people's rights away, and as soon as you say the word dementia, then that person is likely not going to be able to make decisions for themselves. So doctors are careful with that.
But
and
also, I think that you, like, as the child of this person, you know that person best. So the small things that are changing, you're going to recognize more than someone else.
Right.
And I know my mom is the type of person who, like, researches things.
Yes.
So when you notice these small things, you're going to research them and look things up. Like, so I just feel like people
did
who
a
are
lot of
going through
research.
this, it's good to research. It's good to look into things and ask questions, and not just like push things aside when you know your parent the most.
Right.
And you're recognizing these small things that are different.
yeah, and noticing the differences, and then like how progressive it got. It just, there was a lot of looking things up. There was, I did ask a lot of questions, and I did look up people who were going through dementia. Like what am I going to be able to do to help her, and what can I not do? And one of the things that I learned, I think that was one of the most important things, and I tried to stick with this, but sometimes we struggle with this, is when a person is having a hallucination, this can be someone with mental health issues even. When they're having a hallucination, it isn't really helpful to tell them it's not happening, because then they don't trust you. And they also and they'll see that you're more of an enemy than a helper. And you can't convince them because they're actually seeing it, feeling it,
fully
sensing it.
For sure.
It's all real to them, and they think you're the one that's wrong. Like why don't you see this? And you're the one that's crazy. So really,
it's so hard to
all
navigate.
the advice, all the advice to people when with Lewy body especially is go along with it. But it was really hard when she was. So after the hospital. We had to move her into a nursing home at that point because there was no way she could stay at home by herself 24/7.
Yeah.
We couldn't give up our entire life. And so that's something that I feel like I need to talk about is we feel responsible to be there for our parents. And it is very true that you feel like you're going to have to give up everything until they pass away. Some people last years, some don't. Some people are able to do that. But some people are, it will rob you of every ounce of who you are to care for someone to that level. And it isn't healthy for your marriage. It isn't healthy for your relationships. And it's not healthy for your relations sometimes with the parent that you're caring for.
Yeah.
Because you get burnt out and then you can't care for them well.
Right.
So there is balancing, and it's okay to do that. And I had to get to that place of it can't always be me. It can't always, I can't take her on full time because there would be nothing left of me, and I would probably be going down with her, honestly.
Well, it's super heavy.
Emotionally, physically, all of it. And
it's figuring out the boundaries though, because I don't think that majority of people know what their boundaries are until they're like, they have to decide and figure it out in this situation.
Yeah, and every situation is a little bit different. Maybe there are more family members coming in to help. Maybe, there is some push and pull in there for help that we didn't have. And I looked into all the care we could get. And we did access everything that we knew we could access.
Well, and we're not healthy. We're not wealthy. My grandma wasn't wealthy,
and
and there were options to be able to help with those things, which is a good thing.
And really, the state did take good care of her in the sense of making, I just had to access those things, so I had to be proactive in making sure those things got done. That all of her, every time we needed to up her care, we needed to get the interview, the social worker back in for another interview, and there's all this process that you have to keep up with. It is wearing. And it is hard, and
it's a lot of work.
It is, and so it takes an army to raise a child. It takes an army to help a parent with these kinds of problems. To be able to do it healthy and keep them at home for as long as possible. And we did do that. We kept her at home for as long as possible, all the way up to that point where it became dangerous. And at that point, we had to say, we can't.
Decisions had to be
and
made.
She was not happy about it, and I think she was somewhat angry. She would ask my sisters and myself, please take me home, take me home with you. There was some bargaining there, and that was really hard on us, on all of us, and it makes you feel so guilty that you can't let them go in. And so many times I thought, I can just bring her into my house for a while, but what good was that going to do me? And what good was that going to do her? She would stay awake at night and walk the floors and run into the walls and all of that in the nursing home because they couldn't keep her down. She was very active. So,
and you couldn't take that on yourself.
No.
It would have been too much.
My husband and I knew that, and she's blind too. So, even in the hospital, and this is another kind of sad thing that does unfortunately happen, is when I took her to the hospital and she stayed in the ER overnight and they were going to get her into a room. This was when she broke her sternum. And I had to go home and get some sleep because this was Thanksgiving Day. My family had already had Thanksgiving. I was at the hospital with my mom. And so I thought, I'm just going to go home and try to get some sleep and then I'll come back the next day. And during that time, she got very combative and they had to tie her down. So here she is with a cracked sternum. I think she had a broken rib, and they had to tie her down because she wouldn't stay in bed.
Yeah.
And because of that being combative, what ended up happening is before they leave the hospital, they can set them up for a nursing home. But what ends up happening is they send out a message to all the nursing homes and says, this is what their situation is, who can take them, that kind of a thing. And then you have a certain amount to choose from. Well, because of her combativeness, the nursing homes don't want somebody combative. It takes them much more care. And then you add blindness to that. So then my mom became this
difficult case.
person that nobody wanted, except the places that probably weren't the nicest. And that's all we had to choose from. And that was heartbreaking. And so from the time she went into the first nursing home, I was always in search of something else. But at some point, at a point in between, I still constantly asked her, do you want to move to another place? And she would tell me no, like yes at one point, but then no, because it's so hard on them to move when they're already feeling so unstable and so out of sorts and not in their own home that you move them to another place and then they're starting all over again. And it's so traumatic for them that you try not to do that. So she was in a dementia ward where it was locked in, they're locked in to a basic hallway and all these rooms. And it was just, that's heartbreaking for a child to put their parent in a place like that. But we honestly didn't have any other. She needed 24-hour care. She needed nurses. She needed, new medications. And so, it's hard. It's hard on the family to get to that place.
There were good things, though, that Grandma did, and you helped her do in the nursing homes, or, massage the nurses, you were trying to start her own little business.
Giving someone with dementia,
or, what did you do? You made, did you make heat packs and
packs.
Brought a bunch of stuff in for them?
I said, I just thought, what can we do to keep her mind busy? Because her mind would be so focused on hallucinations and other things, that what can we do to keep her busy physically as well. And I literally would take her on walks in the hallway, and she would stand against the wall and do leg lifts with her legs. And she was known for that, going out in the hallway and getting exercise, squats, hanging onto the side of the wall.
She literally could not be stopped.
No. And she constantly wanted to walk, but it always took someone to walk with her because she's blind. She'll run into the walls. She'll run it. So for a facility to take her on is a huge deal.
Sure.
And so once we got her in there, no one else would take her. And so we were basically stuck in that one facility. We had to make the best of that that we could make.
And once she was there and she was kept down, really, her decline was super fast after that. Once she couldn't do much, I think that her mind and her spirit and body just gave up, really.
Well, in a sense, yes. She began having more and more of these scary, people climbing the walls. She said she could see people coming in and they were trying to kill her, that there was a satanic group down the hall that wanted to kill her. Just horrific, horrible, scary hallucinations. And so I was begging the doctor there, and they have a psychologist that comes in, and sees people twice a month or something like that at the facility. And so I was asking him, please, put her on a medication that will prevent this. We tried benzo drugs. We tried some medications for people who are psychotic.
Sure.
And with Lewy body dementia, a lot of those don't work. It actually makes them worse. So it was trying to find the right medicine. And in doing that, there were times that she would tell me, I just don't feel right. Like on top of having dementia, then she was even feeling worse because of some of the medications. And so I don't know that they ever found something. It's a really hard disease to find anything for because the brain is getting kind of eaten away by all of this, and medications aren't going to stop that. The only thing they could have done was just make her sleep all the time. And, you know, they can't do that. It's illegal to do that. And so it is a battle daily for a child to fight for the health and the care of their parent when they're caring for all these other people.
Yeah.
And doctors aren't accessible in these places. I would take her to the doctor, you know, outside of that, and we would make a day of it, getting her out, you know, in the car. But she never really wanted to come back, you know. You know, so then that's traumatic. And then the times when you'd get in the car with her and she would say, why are you doing this to me? Like, why aren't you taking me out of this place? Or even at one point, my mom saying, you're selfish. You are being very selfish because you aren't taking care of me at home. And I could just live with you, and you just want to put me in this place because you don't want to take care of me, you know, and just
even though all of us saw you guys giving everything you could to her, you know, her perspective was different than everyone else, you know, and how we saw you guys doing everything you could for her.
Yeah.
And that her being at your house, her being with you guys, wouldn't have actually been better for her.
No.
In the long run.
It wouldn't have been better, and she would have still had the same hallucinations.
Yeah.
But we don't have a lockdown facility or somewhere to keep her safe. And we
or 24-hour care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like someone around 24 hours.
I tried to get 24-hour care,
Yeah.
and it was impossible.
No.
There was no way to do it.
Yeah.
And so even when she was in the nursing home, the nurses can't be with her all the time. The staff can't be with her all the time. So she was left to herself. And so then we brought people in from another facility that has caregivers and paid for these caregivers to come in, almost $50 an hour, just to keep her company during the day when I was at work. You know, like just it becomes so expensive that you can go broke trying to do that. And so it just became, so it's just hard. It's hard all around. It's hard financially. It's hard emotionally. It's hard on the parent, and that you feel for them. That just where they are is such a it's a hard place to watch them get to this place and be able to do nothing to change that for them. So she did begin to take a lot of falls. And they can't stop her from that either. So in these facilities, they can't tie them down. They can't, which I wouldn't want for her anyway. They can't even put bed rails on so that they can't fall out of bed. You can't put a mat on the floor next to the bed so that if they fall and hit their head, they're hitting a mat instead of the floor, because that's a tripping hazard. There's so many rules that are set up for these facilities to protect people, but also some of them don't protect people. And so she started taking a lot of falls because she can't see. And she was getting more imbalanced. And so I would get calls from them saying, Martha fell and hit her head today. And so then they would tell me, the nurse would look at her and tell me and how she was doing, and was she stable, and did she get back to her normal self. And one of the final things that happened is she was having a hallucination that someone was trying to force feed her. And she said it was a Russian woman, or French. It was a French woman. And it's so, I mean, these things are just so elaborate. But the French woman was trying to force feed her, and she went to push the lady away, which there was no one there. And she fell backwards and hit her head in her room on a cement floor. And so that was a 911 call. We took her to the hospital. And at this point, when I got there, it's just kind of horrifying to see your parent like that. But she had bled so much. I mean, your head bleeds, but she had to have 7 or 8 staples in the back of her head. And I knew too that the only option we had was to bring her back to the same place where she keeps getting hurt, and they can't stop her.
Yeah.
So you're just waiting for the next thing to happen. It's so hard. Sorry.
Yeah. It's okay.
So at that point, they put the staples in and we took her back. They did, I think they kept her overnight. But what were we supposed to do at that point?
No. Yeah.
There's no option. So my poor mom, it's hard. And so we took her back, and within a week of that fall, and I'm sure that she had a concussion, but at that point, they weren't doing any life-saving
Yeah.
procedures for her at that point, because there's no point in that. And so she progressively got worse and just didn't have an appetite to eat anymore or drink. And she laid in that bed, and I can remember one point, she was responsive, but she couldn't talk anymore because I don't think she could remember how to talk. You know, she was saying her ABCs over and over again because she couldn't think of words. And she would just lay there and say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you know, and just go through it on her side and just by herself. Because she was still trying.
Yeah.
But it was taking her mind and her abilities. So it was hard to watch.
Yeah.
Hard to watch and hard to experience with her.
Yeah.
But at that point, thankfully, she qualified for hospice, and the hospice nurses came in, and they were wonderful. I would advise hospice for anyone. At least my experience was that it was so beneficial, and they gave her medication to help kind of keep her more calm and in a better place. And she wasn't agitated, and we weren't forcing her to eat. And I actually feel like something I had mentioned to you before was that I watched a gal on, and maybe you can add that to the bottom of your screen, but there's a gal that I watched on YouTube that is a hospice nurse, and she was awesome. And everything that she explained was made it easier for me to watch my mom go through this, in the sense of understanding what's next. And the hospice nurses did that as well. And, you know, her life was coming to an end. And I had not experienced that with anyone else. My dad died pretty quickly. So I wasn't there at the moment of death. And this time I was. And so that, when it got closer, my sisters came, and we, three of us were there, gathered together, and she was doing the breathing that happens towards the end, and some people call it guppy breathing, I think, and she wasn't, her body had changed, and just all the process of death had started happening, and we stayed 24/7 with her during that time, and took turns making sure somebody was always there. And so after she passed away, you know, all the funeral arrangements, all of that. And I think that what I would say to people is to make sure that you know, during the process after death, you're worn out, you're, you know, organizing things afterwards for the organization of the funeral, all of that is a huge deal, and it becomes very overwhelming if it isn't already set up ahead of time. But also, like, the power of attorney that you have beforehand, so whoever the power of attorney, that ends at death. And they have no power after that. And then what picks up after that is the executor of the will. And so it changes hands if it's two different people.
Yeah.
And if it's not, you know, if it's not the same person. And so then...
Which can be really messy.
Right. It can be very messy, especially in families. And gosh, funerals are always, and especially when there's money involved, can be very sketchy and ruin a lot of relationships. So the more in line it is, the easier the process will be for the family members. So making sure that that's in line and making sure that even us as younger, we don't know when something's going to happen.
Yeah.
So having that laid out ahead of time is so important and valuable for a family.
Yeah.
So I would say that that is probably one of the pieces of advice I would give to people. Look into that. And when you are the power of attorney and you are the executor of a will, there is always a secondary person that can be as take your place if you can't do that. Let's say you've moved away or something else, something happens while you're gone, then you have a secondary person to take your place.
Yeah, and then so like with this channel, I I mean, all this is really sad and hard to talk about. Like, people don't want to talk about death at all.
Yeah.
But I want to highlight the redemption through it, like the good things that come from it.
Right.
And I know through your experience that you do have good things that have come from.
Yeah, I would say the things so the most important thing for me is that I feel like God chose me in the sense of I'm a caretaker personality. So for me to have been the person my mom chose makes sense. To be the executor of her will or to be her power of attorney because I'm naturally that way versus putting someone in a position that's in the family that isn't gifted in that way would make it much harder. But I still would say that every family member should help pitch in because it does make it so hard on the person caring for them so much of the time. And just, not only are you caring for them emotionally and for their physical needs, but you're also doing the financial things and the doctors, and it's just a lot. And I don't think family members really understand the depth of what you're doing because they're outside of that. And
yeah, and it's hard to
unless
have
you-
siblings that live far away who aren't seeing the day-to-day, the things that are happening, and then you end up being responsible for all of them. But
yeah, it is.
But the good things that came from this for you are awesome.
Yeah. So for me, what came out of it is that I, struggled with my relationship with my mom growing up. And then as a married person also, like, there was just a lot of tension with my mom and because of her strong will and her opinions. And so as I was walking through this with her, I'm totally not.
That's okay. You
So
take a deep breath.
with that relationship, and having those times where I just wanted to just say, I'm done, I can't do this anymore. And knowing those, but when she passed, and I really felt like I was so blessed because God allowed me something that I wasn't even expecting. And that was that all of that bitterness, all of that sadness, all of that disappointment in my relationship with her, all of the hurt, all of it was gone. And it wasn't because she passed. It was because that process of walking through her death with her, nobody deserved to have happened to them what happened to her. What I watched her go through was terrible.
Yeah. And you wouldn't wish that on anyone.
No.
Your worst enemy.
Right. And to watch that happen and then to see her responses and her pain and to have that empathy for her that I don't know that I had as much before because it was covered by anger and bitterness and hurt. And so I found that after my mom, well, actually I think I started feeling it before she passed, but just that dissipated. It just went away. And I don't want to talk bad about her. I don't want to make her look bad. I don't have those feelings anymore for her. And that was the blessing and the reward at the end of all of this, was that God gave me the ability to forgive and gave me the ability to process through all of that. But also, to me, there was a miracle in it where I just feel like it happened outside of my effort, outside of my trying to process it.
Yeah.
It just happened.
Yeah, a miracle.
A miracle, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how my sisters are doing with their relationship with my mom and how that's all working, but I know for me, in my care for her, it freed me from a lifelong now of carrying those things that just went away.
Yeah, and
And
it wasn't the intention of you doing it. Like, you didn't serve her or love her the way you did with the intention, like, for it to go away.
Right.
You didn't know that
none
was
of
going to be the outcome.
No, in fact, I thought, man, this is just so difficult and so
Yeah.
hard to care for her. And then, other parts I would think, ugh, like, Lord, please help my mom. Like, I know she's struggling and I don't know how to help her. Like those moments, it was just kind of this back and forth kind of thing. But in the end, yeah, it's good. And it's a huge blessing. And I want that for people. I don't know how to say this is how you get it, but we continued to just keep the journey going and continue to care for her. And I just believe that was God's strength too, in giving me the ability and the power to continue forward with her. But I wouldn't trade that. As much as I can look back and think, oh, that was really hard. Those were a couple of really hard years. I still think it was worth it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
To have the freedom of not carrying any of that at all. And I would say for people who are struggling with their parents or they want to say goodbye, make sure you say goodbye early on if you can. And even if it is toward the end of their life, everything I've watched on that, everything I've heard, it is the right time to say those things and to pour that out. Your parents can take it. Like we think they're laying in bed and they're dying. That is the right time to say, I loved you and I forgive you, and I, all of those things that you might be feeling on the inside. It's just...
Because I think that there are a lot of people that still carry that with them after their parent is gone, but feel no way of releasing it.
Once that moment's over, it's gone. Yeah.
I think that's a scary thing for a lot of people. And they don't want to deal with the reality of possibly losing their parent or that's so hard. But
it's a lot to process, but it can be good and it can be rewarding. And loving someone with that, the intent of care and self-sacrifice, not always easy, but
no,
it is a gift.
Yeah,
it is.
I think it has a lot to do with when we think about love, we think of romantic love or the love of a child, but from my experience of watching you guys, one of the ultimate forms of love and self-sacrifice is taking care of someone you love when they're in a situation like that, or in a long-term illness or something like that.
Yeah.
None of us want to imagine in our future that being a part of our future, because we can easily see how difficult it is.
Yeah.
But these things don't happen when we plan on them happening. They just happen. And to be able to love someone that hard, that much through difficult times is, beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's love crazy. Is not an emotion. It's a commitment. If we always go by our emotions, we are in trouble. But, when you commit to a marriage, you're committed. When you commit to your children, you're committed. You commit to love. And love, emotions, you can love and hate at the same time. But commitment to the end is a huge deal. And, I think, I don't know what else to say.
So with this channel, I want to highlight the good things, and I want to highlight things that if you're going through something similarly, that you can watch these videos and you can see that someone has come through it and there has been good out of it. Because when you're in this situation, when you're going through it, it's really hard to see that there's light at the end of the tunnel, really. My grandma's been gone, I don't know how long.
A couple years now. Oh
No,
no,
not even
it's
a
only been
year.
a year since March. Yeah, a year in
Oh,
March.
almost a year.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
beginning of this. Yeah.
But so, you know, and the process has taken time, and some of you are in the midst of it. But I want this channel to give hope, and people like my mom who now has empathy towards those who are serving their parents in difficult times. And so, is there any advice or any last things that you would say to people, advice that you would give?
Yeah, I would say if you're a sibling and someone else is chosen to be the power of attorney or the executor, doesn't matter, either one, do what you can to help them and use your gifts that you're gifted with, whether you are the person who can make the phone calls to the doctor or you are the person who can help with the the paperwork or even getting supplies, just every little bit kind of helps the person who's actually the main person pouring into your older adult. And and be prepared,
As much as possible.
Ask your parents to have these things done ahead of time so that it's not as much pressure on you and you're not scrambling at the end when you're suffering.
Yeah, because you're doing all
grief.
these things while you're grieving.
Yeah. And I would say if you are grieving and if your parent is coming to the end of life, then think about Grief Group. They have grief care. What is it called? Grief Share. It's called Grief Share. Grief Share. And you can just go online and just look it up, and it'll tell you where a grief share is in your area. And they're probably about 13 weeks long. People who have suffered under all grief situations all gather together, and it's video driven, and it's great. It's a great program. So Grief Share would be one thing that I would definitely advise people to do.
As part of taking care of yourself in these situations, it's good to be in a community. Like, we're not meant to go through these difficult things alone.
Right.
And it's really good to know that other people have gone through it and that you can go to them for advice. My mom can make this video with me, but she's not your neighbor, so you can't go and ask her questions. But your neighbor might have had these experiences. So to seek out opportunities where you can learn from others or get support from others is really important. But anything else? Good.
Take good care of yourself.
Yeah.
Make sure that you are caring for you in the process so that you're not overtasked and lose yourself in the process. Yeah.
Well, thanks for watching. I hope that you guys all learned something from this, as well as if you have anyone that you know that would benefit from this video, definitely send it along to them. But thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for being here, Mom. Bye.
Bye.